The wife is doing it. Just don't go to sleep. Like right away.
Hopefully you get some tricks on that then. Although I'm sure sleeping with your wife being angry at you is probably not a good sleeping tip. Probably need to go to the clear conference.
My dad, he has hearing aids. He says one of the benefits is, you know, when I'm getting nagged or yelled at, I can just turn it off.
I think my grandma does that. She keeps saying, oh, I forgot my, hearing aid. I'm like, did you forget that? I just don't want to hear you. That clock is slow. Give it like one more minute and then I'll do an introduction and then we'll go from there. That's how I'll linger in the back to let people in. The stragglers. People aren't used now with Zoom, people aren't used to having to factor in commute time. It's very different.
You be taking notes.
Is it okay if I record it?
Yeah, you can.
I'm gonna record it and so I can send that to the members here, so if you don't wanna take notes, if not to.
Oh, that'd be great if you do that, yeah. We're not taking notes, I'm busy on.
Perfect.
Awesome, thank you.
Sorry. All right, well, I guess we'll get started then. It's a good segue. All right, so for anybody who doesn't know me, my name's Angela, so you probably all got an email from me, but I am the Director of Clinical Services here, so I oversee all of our support groups and educational presentations. So we're super excited tonight to have Leisha Kadikiti from URMC. So she is a licensed clinical psychologist, board certified in behavioral sleep medicine. A little bit of a tongue twister. Her academic interests include training providers in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia and other behavioral sleep medicine interventions. She serves as director at large on the executive board of the Society of Behavioral Sleep Medicine, and her clinical interests include non-pharmacological treatment of sleep disorders. So without further ado, I'll let you take over.
Thank you. So, definitely, like, this can be informal, so if you have questions as we go along, just shout out, raise your hand, whatever. So behavioral sleep medicine is just kind of what which said about non-medication treatment of sleep disorders. So we'll talk about some general healthy sleep tips today. My job day to day is providing treatment for insomnia most of the time, but also people whose clocks are mismatched with what they want to do, people who have a CPAP that they struggle with, people who have too much sleepiness during the day, really any sleep problem, and how can we use habits and behaviors to help with those things. So before we talk too much about healthy sleep tips, I want to make sure we're differentiating between insomnia and sleep disturbance. Insomnia is a clinical disorder. The symptoms of insomnia are difficulty falling or staying asleep, or waking up too early and not being able to get back to sleep. Poor sleep quality or quantity. And all of it has to happen when you give yourself enough time to sleep. So if you're staying up till 3 a.m. and you gotta get up at 7, that doesn't count as insomnia, that counts as not going to bed early. So if somebody just has this, we would call that a sleep disturbance. An insomnia disorder happens when you have all of those insomnia symptoms, plus some kind of daytime consequence, feeling tired, irritable, trouble concentrating, other mood changes, sometimes memory, and it has to happen at least 3 nights a week for a duration of about 3 months. So you have episodic nights where you don't sleep well, that's not necessarily an insomnia disorder, and you can probably benefit from doing some of the things we're going to talk about, healthy tips. Healthy sleep tips are not going to treat an insomnia disorder, though. That requires a little more like strategic planning and intervention. But that's what I do day to day. So first tip, go to bed when you're feeling sleepy. So what's important to know about that is there's a difference between being tired and being sleepy. A lot of people go to bed when they're tired. But as some of you have probably experienced, being tired when you go to bed doesn't mean that you'll fall asleep necessarily. Being tired is mostly like a physical sensation, like it's harder to exert effort, sometimes your limbs can get heavy, you don't really feel like doing very much. But even if you feel tired, you can still feel very awake. Sleepiness, on the other hand, is the biologic need and increased likelihood of actually falling asleep. So the signs of sleepiness are things like your head is starting to nod, your eyes are heavy, sometimes blurred vision, losing the ability to concentrate. So like you're reading a book and you have to read the same sentence 3 times, that's a good, I mean, that could be a sign of fatigue too, but that's usually often a sign of sleepiness too. So going to bed when you're tired isn't always successful, but going to bed when you're sleepy, you got a better chance of being able to fall asleep. The next healthy tip is avoid doing things other than sleeping when you're in bed. You want your bed to be a place that your brain recognizes as being used for sleep, so that when you go there, your brain expects to sleep and therefore can sleep a little easier. So things like going to bed to watch TV or reading in bed or phones in bed, things like that, can disrupt that connection that your brain has between bed and sleep. That doesn't mean if you're reading for 15 minutes and kind of relax before you go to bed and then you can put the book down and go right to sleep, that's probably not a big deal. But if you're reading to help you fall asleep and then you're reading for 4 hours and you're still out of sleep, that's probably not. This can get challenging with fatigue. And especially fatigue that's related to cancer and cancer treatments, it can make the bed very tempting and you can feel tired a lot of the time and more tired sometimes if you haven't been through cancer and its treatments. So it can be really helpful to have a separate place for if you're going to be resting or if you're going to be sleeping. If you can't have a separate location, you could be in bed, but try to sit in a different position or a different way across your bed. So that you have the key thing is to have a distinct like setup for sleep. So you can try sitting upright, you can lay across the bed like perpendicular, or put your feet at the other end, laying on the other side of the bed, so that your brain knows that like we're not going to sleep right now because we're in this location instead of this location. So again, the purpose is to have a location or a position specific for sleeping, so that when you get into that position or location, that's what your brain expects to do. The good news is that there's recent research that shows that increasing the amount of time you sleep can improve fatigue. This was a very small study in breast cancer survivors. They're doing a bigger study right now that I'm part of. But it's important to note that spending more time in bed doesn't always mean you're sleeping more. So the study that I'm referencing here was actually done in breast cancer survivors who did not have an insomnia complaint. They just had fatigue complaints. And what they did was say, okay, like you're sleeping 7 hours, just gradually get a little more sleep. And they found that that helped make the fatigue better, which is actually a really novel, interesting finding, because a lot of times I mean, doctors as well as community kind of like, well, of course you're tired because you've been through all the stuff and you've had all the chemicals. But what we're learning is that might not be a foregone conclusion that you're doomed to feel tired for the rest of your life. So, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean to just go to bed earlier if you're not ready to sleep, which leads to the next rule. Don't stay in bed awake. So these people who are wide awake, feeling probably a little aggravated that they are not sleeping, is not a good scenario to be in. So we're talking about not doing other things like reading or watching TV in bed to have a good association between the bed and sleep. When you have this problem, and you're doing this night after night and feeling frustrated or anxious or aggravated that you can't fall asleep, instead of teaching your brain that the bed is a place you go to sleep, now you're teaching it that it's a place to go to feel anxious and worried and frustrated and alert. So a lot of people who have an insomnia disorder, where this is happening night after night after night, will have the experience of like, well, I'm dozing off on the couch, but the second I walk into bed, I'm wide awake. Because that's what you accidentally trained your brain to do. Unfortunately, there's no light switch to just put yourself to sleep when you go to bed. If there were, I probably would have a different career. So the only thing you can do to stop this from happening is to get up if you're not sleeping. If you notice, sometimes people throw out like 20 minutes. You shouldn't be, I'm sure some of you have probably heard that before, stay awake in bed longer than 20 minutes, which is okay. But if you sit and watch the clock to see whether it's been 20 minutes or not, there's a pretty clear chance that you're going to be awake. Now you're watching the clock. The rule that I use is if you are awake and you are feeling frustrated or having any of that negative, like emotional experience, you're probably not going to fall asleep. So you may as well just get up and reset a bit. So what do? You can really do whatever you want in the middle of the night. I know that sounds weird and you probably wouldn't expect me to say that, but you don't want to go run a marathon or do something that's super stimulating. You probably want to avoid up close electronics like computers and phones. But even some people will be okay with that. Nothing that's too productive. So you don't work on like your garden plan or something that you need to get done before, like by a deadline. Nothing that's going to get you more revved up, but this is a little different for everybody. I like to watch like the true crime mysteries, because something about the voice of the people that narrate those is just calming, even though they're talking about it. But lots of people would not find that relaxing or sleep inducing. But the point is to do something that is going to give your brain space to be sleepy again. If you're sitting up thinking about all the things you have to do the next day, or thinking about the fact that you're awake, or thinking, the sleep doesn't have a leg in there. So something that you can watch, I usually say like reruns of a show that you like, or a movie that you've seen a bunch of times, so you're not invested in like the content necessarily, but it's enjoyable. Or reading a book you've read before, again, not a page turner that you're gonna stay up to read or to watch, but something that you can put down easily. Because ultimately you want to try to stay out of bed until you're feeling sleepy. Or like at least half an hour. Again, the point of this isn't to put you back to sleep. And that's another mistake people make when they like try this. So, well, of course, getting out of bed isn't gonna help put you to sleep. That's not what we're doing. We're giving up on sleeping right now. And we're taking a break from trying to sleep. Trying to sleep is 99% of the time ineffective. The harder you try, the less likely you are to get to sleep. So we're just letting that go for a while. We're shifting gears. We're just doing something to pass time. Your brain will get sleepy again. Your brain is built to sleep. If you don't sleep, your brain is unhappy. And if you go too long, it's very bad for health. So that's why your brain will eventually get sleepy. You just kind of wait for it. It's like a cat. Who is a cat? Okay. I'm gonna pick on you because you're right in front. But if you want to pet your cat, say you really want to pet your cat and you start chasing it, what does it do?
Oh, nice.
Right. And then how do you pet your cat ever?
Oh, I wait for him to come to me.
That's what you're doing with your sleep. You can't chase your sleep around all night because you won't get it. You just gotta sit and wait, and it'll come to you. And then when it comes, go back to bed. Came up with that one. So I use a lot of metaphors, and that's the only one I've ever come up with. I already mentioned this a little bit, but it's not really a great idea to watch the clock all night, especially if you have something to do in the morning. But really, like, it doesn't really do you any good to know what time it is in the middle of the night. Odds are you're either gonna like say, oh well, and roll over. But if you're struggling, you're probably gonna be like, oh no, like, or oh, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, or something like that. And any kind of negative emotion you have in the middle of the night is more likely to make you feel alert instead of sleep. You don't need to know if you need to get up in the morning, set an alarm. If the alarm hasn't gone off, Pretend you have plenty of time to sleep. Speaking of alarms, keeping a consistent wake up time or close to consistent wake up time every day, no matter how your night went, is an important strategy for maintaining your body's internal clock. So everybody has a clock in their brains that tells us when the right time to go to bed is, when the right time to go to sleep is, or wake up is. The clock does a lot of other things like when to release hormones, when we eat, when we poop, all these things. But the central clock is the sleep clock, and it's regulated by daylight and by behavior patterns. So getting up at the same time every morning and getting some natural light when you wake up is a nice signal that it's time to be awake for the day. And if you sleep in when you have a bad night, you're teaching yourself that like it's okay to have a bad night because you can always make up for it the next morning. So this gets back to like you're sacrificing this night. It stunk, you're probably gonna feel worse, but you can use that worse to help you sleep the next night. And I said fairly consistent. So you don't have to get up at the same exact time every single day, but you want to try and keep it within an hour or two at the same time. So this sounds super easy, right? A lot of times it's our minds that get in the way of us getting to sleep or getting back to sleep. There's no light switch for this either. There are lots of different strategies that people use. Does anybody use anything to help kind of relax or calm their thinking at night or any other time?
Yoga, meditation, alcohol.
Alcohol, I cannot recommend alcohol. But yoga and meditation are good ones.
I'm honest.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So this is not necessarily what we want to be doing at night. Like nighttime is not a good problem solving time. Our frontal lobes of our brain is where we do all our rational, like problem solving, thinking, critical thinking, and then the first thing falls asleep. So if you're up trying to solve a problem, it's not going to go very well at the beginning or towards the, if you're having trouble falling asleep, or if you wake up in the middle of the night, not a good time to be doing that. Quieting the mind, meditate. I'm a big fan of meditation. There are all sorts of apps and recordings you can find everywhere now. But what I always say about meditation is it is a skill. You can't just throw meditation on when you're feeling anxious or when you're having trouble sleeping and expect it to put you to sleep. This is something you have to practice during the day. So it's like swimming. Like you don't take a boat out to the middle of the ocean and jump in to learn to swim. You get in the shallow end and you practice a little bit. So you want to try to find a nice quiet time when you're not feeling super agitated or anxious, and find a recording that you might like and practice on a routine basis. It could be like 2 minutes, like 6 times a day. It could be 30 minutes once a day, really anything that's routine because you're learning the exercise. And then when you know what you like and what you're looking for and what to do, then you can play it when you're having trouble sleeping or before you go to bed, things like that to help focus your attention, retrain your attention, or calm down.
I use white noise too.
White noise is kind of white noise.
Sorry, what did you say about white noise?
I'm gonna circle back.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's coming up. I don't remember what, but there are all sorts of different types of relaxation and meditation exercises. Everything from like progressive muscle relaxation, like tensing and relaxing the muscles in your body, to more esoteric things like imagining your thoughts on leaves floating down a stream, things like that. If you're new to meditation, I like something that's focused in the body. And this is really personal because I have a hard time imagining leaves on streams, but I can focus on my breathing really easily because I can feel it in my body. So something like a breathing meditation or a body scan where you're focusing on different areas of your body, not trying to change anything, just noticing. If you try a relaxation exercise, sometimes that can make you more tense. If you try, the same thing as trying to sleep. If you try to relax too hard, sometimes it can cause anxiety. So just look out for that if you try that kind of exercise. It's another reason I like mindfulness because it's just non-judgmental observation rather than changing things. There's a free app that I like to use called Insight Timer. I can give you the information later if you're interested.
What's the name of that again?
Insight Timer,
Insight.
insight like an idea, INSIGHT.
Me too.
So environment can also be important. Remember, these aren't things that are gonna fix insomnia, but there are things that our body likes to sleep. So it says quiet on there, but you heard the phrase, it's so quiet, I could hear a pin drop. So if that's what your sleep environment is like, you're gonna hear pins on it. Well, we don't want a completely quiet sleep environment because there are things that happen overnight. Like I can hear my refrigerator from my bedroom for some reason. It's not broken, I just can hear it. So white noise is something that helps kind of provide this buffer between your brain and your environment. So anything that goes, like you're not gonna miss a smoke alarm or sirens or anything really important, but you're not gonna hear the AC or furnace kicking on and off, or the house settling, or pets walking around because it is loud enough to block out some of those random noises. Having a comfortable, so there's no, don't ask me about mattresses, there's no right mattress or pillow or anything like that. You need to find what's comfortable for you. But having something that's comfortable for you is important. Dark bedroom when you're sleeping, so light, as I mentioned already, light wakes up your brain. So you want to make, especially if you're a late sleeper, you want that last couple hours of your sleep to be good. You want to have really dark blinds, so after the sun comes up, if you're gonna sleep later than that, you can stay asleep better. Temperature is important. The ideal temperature for sleep is between 62 and 68 degrees. But again, if that's too cold for you to feel comfortable, then you don't keep it that cold. Sleep prefers cold. We have a natural, like, our body temperature kind of dips at night. That's why sleep likes cold. But the most important thing is that it's a temperature that's comfortable for you. Try to demonstrate. Right. Sure. Okay. And I think this is the last thing. So daytime habits are also important. We've been talking a lot about what to do at night, but the things you do during the day can affect the way you sleep. So caffeine, fine in the morning, tends to stay in your system for anywhere between 8 to 10 hours. So usually you want to cut off caffeine by noon or 2 at the latest. Having meals at the same time every day helps. It's another just signal to our body's clock about what time of day it is. And even having a snack before bed can help kind of, you have dinner between 5 and 6 at night, and you don't wake up until 6 or 7 in the morning, it's a long stretch to go without eating. So having a little snack before bed can kind of help tide you over. Not anything major, cheese and crackers, something with a little protein that fills you up a little more and helps you stay full overnight. Napping. Gotta get the puppy napping. There's a place for napping. The main thing with napping is you want to make sure it's separate from both your morning sleep and your nighttime sleep. So usually midday is the best time to nap. And when we nap longer than an hour, we start to get into deeper sleep, which you would think would be a good thing. But if you do it during the day, it steals away from your deeper sleep at night. So you want to try and limit naps to about an hour. Exercise is good for sleep. Again, there's not any, you don't want to do vigorous exercise within a couple hours at that time, but other than that, whatever time you like is fine. Alcohol is not good for sleep. It can make you drowsy for sure, but when it leaves your body, it causes mini hangovers. I know even if you have a glass of wine, it's not really a hangover, but you get dehydrated and it can cause more awakenings in the second half of the night. Having a glass of wine with dinner is probably out of your system before you go to bed. But having 3 glasses of wine right before bed, you're probably going to be struggling after 2 or 3 in the morning. Nicotine and tobacco are stimulants, and obviously any substance use is going to affect your sleep in a variety of ways. I really just put this on here because it has all these things around it, but I like this idea. Some people really like to have things kind of tidy before they go to bed. I'm not this person. But, if you get bothered when things aren't finished, trying to structure your evening, you don't want to be like rushing to get dishes done or laundry folded right before you go to bed. So keeping things in mind and either making it okay to go to bed when things are unfinished or doing them earlier in the evening so that you can go to bed feeling like, all right, like I'm okay to go to sleep, so you're not thinking about whatever you didn't get done. Yeah, that was my last slide. So I wanted it to be brief so we could spend a lot of time kind of like questions, we can chat about sleep. I can stand up here or I can sit.
That was,
You pretty much, are you gonna get into possible over the counter type?
I can't, yeah. So the main, so there's a lot there. I would say I used to be able to say with confidence, the main two things you see, but it's not really true. So there's the Benadryl classes of over-the-counter medications. This is like any of the PM, like Tylenol, Excedrin, Advil PM, Unisom, Z-Quil. Some of them have a mix of melatonin, but they're antihistamines. So either Benadryl or doxylamine, diphenhydramine or doxylamine. Usually don't recommend taking those, especially long-term, but those medications have stay in your system for a long time. So a lot of times they will cause drowsiness in the morning. And anything that says it's not habit forming, probably true from a biochemical standpoint, but anything you take that helps you sleep, you're bound to rely on it over time. So the diphenhydramine and antihistamine classes of medications are a little just riskier long-term use. There's no studies on this because nobody makes money studying over-the-counter medications, but we think that they're associated with worse long-term consequences, and they interact with a lot more medications. Melatonin hardly interacts with anything. The thing about melatonin is, and there's constant research on melatonin just because it's interesting, I think. Nobody's making money, but it's involved in so many things. It's a hormone. Our brains make melatonin in the pineal gland, and it's regulated by bright light, by natural light. When I say bright light, I mean like sunlight, not just bright light. So when the sun comes up in the morning, it sends a message to our brain to stop making melatonin, and then as the sun goes down at night, sends a message, so that message to stop goes away. So we start making melatonin. We make melatonin on a curve, so we actually start making melatonin close to dinner time, or a little after, when it just starts happening, and we make a little teeny amount, and then over the course of the night we make more, and about halfway through sleep we start making less, and by the morning we're not making much. The way people take melatonin over the counter is usually like 3 to 10 milligrams at that time, which is probably way more than your brain is ever making. Your brain only has a certain number of neuroreceptors that can process melatonin. So usually 6 milligrams is maxing that out. It's not dangerous to take 10. I wouldn't take more than 10. That's just wasting money. It's not doing anything. But it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't interact with anything. Some people get side effects of nightmares from melatonin. Yeah, which I don't know why, but it's something I hear a lot. I used to work at pediatrics, and a lot of kids do get nightmares with it, but even some adults do, and I don't know exactly why that is, but something to look out for. Some people feel groggy in the morning with higher doses. The thing is, that's weird about melatonin is that it's not a sedative. When our brain makes it, it's kind of like a road sign. Like, hey, it's getting dark out, like we're gonna be drowsy soon. So when you take a big dose of melatonin at bedtime, you're just like, hey, it's dark, let's go to bed. It's not making you sleepy. Some people, there's constant research coming out. So more recent research shows that for some people there is like a sedative property. So it can help people fall asleep. They even make time release versions that can help people stay asleep. Certainly if you're going to take anything over the counter, you want to talk to your doctor. Melatonin is on the safer side. So, and then we get into all of the other things. There's a million different supplements. Most of like the blends on the market have melatonin, And that's really what's doing it. There has, like I said,
What is it called?
melatonin.
No, no,
Oh.
one.
Like they have herbal sleep blends that have passion flower, oil, valerian, chamomile, lavender, all these things. There's been limited research on chamomile, lavender, and valerian. And none of them did any better than placebo in research. That being said, some people feel that they're helpful. Odds are they're not, I mean, we don't know how harmful they are because they're not regulated the same way that prescription medications are regulated. They don't have to get FDA approval. Even with melatonin, there was a study that came out a few years ago testing the like actual melatonin content of over the counter. And over the counter melatonin can contain anywhere from like 2 to 300% of what it says it contains the melatonin. So if you get 3 milligrams, it could have a half a milligram and it could have like 90 milligrams. Yeah, it's crazy.
I have a question. So if melatonin is released in your brain as nightfall is coming on, would you suggest them taking the melatonin earlier and not waiting until bedtime?
So yeah, I think you can play with it. It's a little different how everybody responds to it. So I mentioned some of the work I do is with people whose clock is set wrong. So there are people who don't get the signals about bedtime until much later at night. Like maybe like a high schooler, like I don't go to bed till 2 and I get up at, oh, see, there you go. So that's called the delayed circadian rhythm. And if you're trying to fix that, often what we'll do is give a teeny tiny dose of melatonin when you're supposed to be making it to try to like jumpstart your system. If you're talking like just want help falling asleep, and there's not really a clock problem, it's just more insomnia-y, I think just experimenting with it and finding what works best. Most stuff doesn't work immediately. Like the prescription, like Ambien, Lunesta, those things should work pretty quick, but even they highly variable. Some people take them a half hour, hour before bed. Some people take them 5 minutes and have trouble taking that. So
Follow up on melatonin. I heard that if you take melatonin, it sort of replaces your body's ability to
there's,
produce it.
yeah, I've heard that too. And there's lots of, I think there's lots of
Undetermined at this
stuff.
point.
Yes, there's no evidence to suggest that that's true.
Okay.
There are people who make less melatonin to begin with.
Okay.
But there's no way to really test that. Because, well, there is, but there's no way to test it that insurance will pay for. It's like, and it's a pain in the butt. Even if we could test for one time, like how much melatonin you have in your system, it doesn't tell us anything unless we test like around the clock.
Continuously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like saliva samples every half hour for like 8 hours. We've done it in research studies before. And so that's how we get some of this information. But practically, that's not something we can do to like diagnose. So usually it's like, see what you get over the counter.
I have a question about, so this is like a normal person's problem, you know, but there's someone I know, who's, in high school, who's, goes through time of being up all night and sleeping all day. And this is now his 30 something. Is that gonna be like a disease or is that?
Yeah, well, like cyclical or all the time, he's up all night and sleeping all day.
It's like.
Yeah, I'm sure that's some kind of circadian rhythm disorder. It takes a lot more, I mean, I can't answer based on, like it could be a lot of different things. So, I mean, I think an assessment is worth like by a sleep expert, sleep physician. But it sounds like some kind of circadian, like his clock isn't working correctly.
Like the one captain involved for a while.
I'm sure, yeah.
I got the other question is like, there are some people that have different times, but they, like the night people and the morning people, so that's real.
Yeah, and there's a difference. So everybody has their own like circadian preference. Like, and I'm sure you can find a million different like quizzes on Facebook if you want to investigate. But if you're early, if you like to go to bed and get up early, you're like an early bird. If you like to stay up late and sleep in, you're a night owl. Like, really, we only call that a sleep disorder if it's interfering with your life in some way. So if I'm a night owl, but I have to get up at 6 o'clock every morning to get to work, and that means I'm only getting 4 hours of sleep. That's a problem, and that's sleeping early. But if I'm a night owl and I work a second shift job, it's not really a problem.
So how do you get assessed for this? You go to a sleep disorder clinic and
Yeah, so our clinic, so we have, I don't know, 5, 6 physicians. There's 1.5 of me. And yeah, like, so it depends on who else, like, there are definitely other medical professionals, varying levels of like knowledge and awareness about sleep. But to get to like nitty gritty, like diagnosis, it's best to see a sleep provider, which unfortunately probably takes 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
yeah. Well,
I know, I always started the year, oh my wait, sorry.
another thing is, like, I did a sleep study maybe about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. I've always had insomnia. And, that you do it for 2 nights. But my problem usually is I don't sleep one night and then the next night, then I catch up. So,
That's not an uncommon pattern, you gotta stop catching up.
yeah, so, but I've done this all my life. I function on about 4 to 5 hours of sleep. But, how would you even, then doing a sleep study really is not gonna help you because they're not really seeing a true picture of it.
Well, so we don't usually do sleep studies for insomnia disorders.
Okay.
Sleep study is usually used to rule out or in like things like sleep apnea, like movement disorders in sleep, like kitchen kicks or twitches. Sometimes like bigger behavior like sleepwalking and stuff. Even that's hard to catch on one night. So that's really what we're trying to figure out in a sleep study. And insomnia disorder is more pattern based. So what I have people do is fill out a log for 2 or 3 weeks so I can see what it looks like over a long period of time. And no, like I said, like what I would say is like you can't compensate. You've got to have bad sleep every night for a while and then build not bad sleep, but you're only sleeping 6 hours, then only sleep 6 hours. You're stuck in this. I mean, don't do that because I'm not treating you, but an example.
A repetitive example would be, something that a sleep study would perhaps be able to diagnose.
Right, so things that are like we call them intrinsic sleep disorders, like a physiological disorder, like your airways collapsing and you're stopping breathing, that's probably gonna happen every time you sleep.
Mhm.
Same thing with like twitches. But if you're only sleeping 3 hours a night, there's a good chance we won't pick it up if you're only sleeping 3 hours for the sleep study. So generally it's good, but it's only if you sleep in the lab.
I wake up every hour and a half, all night long. I just roll over, fall back to sleep. I come out of a deep sleep, deep REM, wake up, roll over, fall asleep.
Does that bother you?
An hour and a half a night, continuously,
So you fall right back to sleep.
it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
So I would say
And I've
that,
been doing it for probably about 10 years.
yeah, that shouldn't by itself make you exhausted. If you're getting right back to sleep right away, it's normal to wake up every 90 minutes, because guess what happens after that? You know what's 90 minutes long? Our REM cycles.
Okay.
So we have 4 stages of sleep, 1, 2, 3 in REM.
Yeah, but I wake up right at the end of the REM cycle.
Right. So it's normal for people to wake up after each of those cycles. So 3 or 4 times a night, even sometimes. If you're getting right back to sleep and you're still not feeling rested in the morning, there might be something else that's contributing to that, those wake ups. You have more sleep apnea when we're in REM sleep. So that I think is worth investigating. If you're sleeping a full like 7 or 8 hours, but you're just waking up 4 times and getting right back to sleep and feeling unrested, I think you should get evaluated.
We'll see you in 6 to 9 months. Then.
Questions?
How about CBD?
Hit or miss. I mean, there's not really research on the more like new, like clinical, but just because I haven't been around long enough. I just anecdotally, I have some patients that do really well with it and other people that it doesn't seem to have any effect. I think sometimes when people get really into it, they can like find right, like I mean, I have people that grow their own and like they found the right strain and that, but I don't know how much of that is placebo because they worked so hard on it and like now it's not conferred or. I would say if something suggested by your other doctors, it probably is worth a try, but we don't know a lot about, when they study sleep in like marijuana users, which means anything from occasional to like chronic use, there's not great outcomes, but I don't know how that really compares to like climate at CBD, separate from THC, smoking marijuana versus, but yeah, what's going on now versus what the studies were done like 20 years ago, so. And there's probably been some since then, I just am not up to date.
Hi, I have two questions. I have sleep apnea. And I also am using Prozozin mini press because I have nightmares. My questions are, what do you think of Prozozin, which is a blood pressure medicine? And do you know if anybody's come out with a better machine than a mask? Because I don't like them. I throw them off
Yeah,
and then I'm snoring all the time.
so your first question, so prazosin is really good for a lot of people. It was accidentally discovered to be effective for nightmares because they were experimenting. They were studying it as a blood pressure medication for veterans. And they found that the veterans that got the blood pressure medication had fewer nightmares. So it was totally, and now it's mostly prescribed for nightmares because it wasn't that great at low blood pressure. So I've seen a handful of people that don't benefit. It's really best for trauma related nightmares rather than just random nightmares. But lots of people have success with it. CPAP stink. I have one. I use it because when I don't, I feel like crap, but I don't really particularly enjoy it. How long have you had it?
I had it for approximately a year, and my conflict was I didn't like the mask, so I was unintentionally throwing it off.
Yeah.
And then I had to return the machine because my
You didn't use
insurance
it,
wouldn't cover it, because I didn't sleep 4 more hours.
Well, because you didn't have it on for more hours. I mean, it's picking hairs, but like you can wear 4 hours during the day and shrink your insurance if that's what you want to do. But irrelevant. Yeah, so depending on when you last tried it, there may be new masks out there, but CPAP is still the gold standard for treating sleep apnea. The new thing you've probably seen commercials for is Inspire.
Yeah.
So it's surgery. It's implantable device. It's an electronic stimulator. It stimulates the nerve in your tongue muscle. Because when sleep apnea is caused by collapse in the airway, which is when our muscles relax when we're sleeping, all of the tissue relaxes, and then like you snore and stop breathing. So it kind of gives a little pulse of electricity that makes your, I mean, it doesn't do that, but I think it does. Some people say it makes their tongue stick out, but it tenses up your tongue so your airway stays open. There are very specific criteria for qualifying for Inspire. You have to fail CPAP first, meaning you can't tolerate it or whatever. You have to be a certain weight. You have to have a certain severity of sleep apnea. So it's certainly something you could talk to your sleep doctor about. That's just pretty rigid requirement. You've got to do a bunch of testing ahead of time, and CPAP is really tricky. And if you're taking it off in the middle of the night without really being aware of it, it's really hard. That's the most thing I struggle with most in helping patients, because you're putting it on every night before you go to bed and you're waking up 7 hours later with it off. Like, the only option is to set an alarm at some point during the night, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to like wake yourself up in the middle of the night. So I don't have any great tips, but other than, there might be different masks out now, depending on the last time you tried it. But there's not a lot of great options. Unless, I mean, also depend, you can use, they make oral appliances as well. Those are generally most effective with milder sleep apnea. They push your jaw forward. So it pulls your head a little bit. And there are certain dentists that specialize in that.
I was prescribed Zolpidem, Ambien, like 4 or 5 years ago. Only used a couple tablets and just for the very rare occasion. But the last time, for 5 milligrams, the last time I used it was like after 2 o'clock in the morning, and it just made me really wired, almost like I was taking prednisone or something. It had the opposite effect.
There's lots of different things.
Does that
that
ever
could
happen?
So it does, and there's a million different things that could explain that, like you're already up, and if it's 2 AM, you've probably been trying to sleep for a while.
Well, it kind of made it worse.
Well, and that, it could be because of medication, but there could be other, like psychological, like if it didn't work right away and then you got more frustrated, like there's lots of different things.
I
that
got,
play into
I
it.
got very deep. I
Yeah,
just thought it's opposite of what I do.
it's not often, but it's not, I've heard it before. I've heard of other people. Benadryl does that, and Benadryl can cause restless legs as well, or make restless legs worse.
What?
Versus sleep syndrome.
Benadryl.
But I think, I mean, it sounds like you were taking it the right way. I mean, there's lots of people that can take a medication that works for a little bit and then doesn't work anymore. And I mean, I don't know why that would have happened, but it's not an unheard of thing.
Are there any sleep positions that are better than others to keep your airways from closing down?
Oh, positions.
Yeah.
Back is bad. I thought you were asking me if there are sleep positions. I'm not sure. I don't like it. So sleeping on your back is bad.
Okay.
So then all of your not only your tongue is kind of falling back and like your neck is falling back, but if you're heavier, your diaphragm has to work harder if you're on your back. Other than that, I think that's I mean, and having your neck in weird positions, like trying to have your neck kind of stable and flat-ish, so you're not like tilted.
Whatever.
Yeah, anything that affects your breathing. I mean, obviously you can still breathe when you're like this. So sides are okay, but if you have a pillow that kind of keeps level with your shoulder.
So there's like these pillow mist sprays with like different scents in them. Is there any research about like scents that help with like soothing stuff or no?
I mean, if you like it and you find that it's calming, go for it. I mean, I had one person come in who was using a million different kinds of lavender, like literally like sprays, cookies, bath beads, like soap, like, and she still wasn't sleeping. So that's not the answer. But if you have something that you like, then that's fine. I don't think that essential oil thing is a little iffy, breathing stuff in, but obviously you have to pay attention for sensitivities. If you pick something like that up, try it before you put it on your pillow before sleep. But there's not a lot of research in it, but even like anecdotally, never heard anybody say, yeah, I started spraying lavender on my pillow and it really helped. But then I guess they wouldn't be seeing me, so maybe there's a whole lavender about it.
I babysit 3 kids under the age of 6, and if they start waking up, certain things that I can give them.
Not recommended.
Whiskey.
We try to avoid it in kids, especially that young. Some parents,
Luckily, they're good right now, but I never
yeah. Some parents choose to give their kids melatonin. It's a little dicier than an adult, just because. I mean, there's a reasonable way to do. I used to tell my parents, not my parents, but parents that I saw, like if you're gonna try melatonin, just make sure you tell them it's just a nighttime vitamin or something, not a sleeping help, because you don't want. I had parents come in and like, no, my kid won't go to sleep because if I don't have their sleep gummy, I'm like, well, we probably shouldn't call it a sleep gummy. But
my kids are 40, when they were babies, I didn't have them in the bottle.
yeah, I mean, things like that, like herbal, I mean, I don't know what the section is, but yeah, I would err towards things like that, like just relaxing. The best thing you can do for kids is having consistent routines, relaxing environments. White noise is great for kids, unless they don't have it at home and you're making their sleep environment a little different. But it's what's really tough is when everything changes up. Like if you're a grandma and grandpa's and there are a whole different set of rules, and like if you can do all the same bedtime routines that mom and dad do, they have a much better chance of getting to sleep easily, and find out what mom and dad do in the middle of the night if they wake up. Having that consistency is
Green spider.
that sounds like fun.
Did you have a question? Any other questions? Nothing, that's it.
If we name drop, can we get in earlier?
I mean, I literally have booked solid for at least 2 months, but I always get cancellations, so if you get a referral and get in there.
Can't you do something like just online, since you're not physically
There-
examining a person,
Well, I do
virtual person?
do Zoom appointments, but I don't, they're all.
You're still booked up.
Yeah, there are some online CBT for insomnia programs. The hard thing is that they're self-paced and they're not really tailored. Like, so it's not an unreasonable thing to start with. There's something called CBTI Coach. That's an app that the VA developed. There's another something like that, but, so there's, those apps will kind of give you a good starting point, but they're not, like, things always come up that get in the way or that are factors that an app isn't gonna be able to tailor to every single person. That's the advantage of seeing.
Typically, what's it cost per
It's
visit?
insurance, and it's a mental health benefit, so most Medicare covers mental health with no copay. But I'm not in charge of that, so don't quote me. But yeah, you would check with your behavioral health benefits. It's still standard psychotherapy, evaluation and treatment codes.
There's online insomnia chat groups too,
Yeah. Those could either make you feel really good or really bad. Yeah, I'm on all the Reddit insomnia things, and I initially was like, I'm gonna do some good, and I'm like, no. It's way too much time.
At 3 a.m, you have someone to chat with.
Yeah, so do you think that some of the stuff that we eating today has an effect in our sleep? Because I was born in the Dominican Republic, and I never heard people staying up all night, children. And I'm a medical interpreter, so I went through a couple scenarios today where children cannot even make it to school because they had insomnia, because they had nightmares to the melatonin. Yeah, and things with the nature. So I'm thinking this could be because
I'm sure that that's true, but we don't know what, and I'm sure there are cultural differences too, of how we approach sleep, and I think in America has undervalued sleep in general for a long time, as like we're a working culture, so we value productivity over sleep, and just now starting to kind of realize the consequence of that had. So I think there are lots of things that play into that difference. And tech, yeah, access to tech, all sorts of things. I'm sure like, processed foods have been great for you, and the more like raw foods and whole foods you can have in your diet, et cetera. There's just not a ton of, there is some evidence on it, but I don't remember. Actually, one of my best friends did a study on it. But it wasn't anything like, if you eat this, it'll be better. If you avoid this, it'll be better. It's more esoteric and hard to decipher.
You're excellent. You were an excellent lecturer because I didn't fall asleep.
Is there anything out there besides CBT?
Like in terms of non-medication,
Yeah, of like a psychological profile, because CBT does not work for me. I've tried it many times.
for what?
Sleep,
Okay.
insomnia.
So yeah, there are, you need to come see me. It's not readily accessible, like in a broad, like
Yeah,
general.
no,
like,
I've gone through a sleep disorder
Yeah.
on West Falls. And
I've only been there a year.
no, you weren't there.
I'm not saying that I can teach, but, yeah, so there are people that don't respond well to CBTI. And there are lots of potential reasons, and there are other approaches. There are mindfulness-based insomnia interventions. There's something called acceptance and commitment therapy for insomnia. So the answer is yes. But that gets more complex than it's easy to explain. Yeah.
Can you recommend any books or anything? I do have a little background in the field.
Yeah. I don't remember. It's a small world, so when I say my friends, I'm not like trying to name drop, it's just that everybody knows each other. And I can't remember the name of the book.
We don't know. Sort of.
Oh, I can use that phone. So this book I'm gonna say has a lot of CBT stuff in it, but it throws in some other stuff. The self-help is hard, like especially if CBT hasn't worked for you, because most of it's gonna be CBT based. It's called Hello Sleep. It's got a little more, so it's gonna be, you're gonna have to leave, it's by Jade Wu, Jade W-U.
W-O-U?
W-U. It's gonna be a lot of CBT stuff, but it's got like an acceptance kind of thread into it, so it's not just about like these things, things that you can do, but it's also about kind of how you approach it from a psychological standpoint and like learning not to panic over it and focusing some on like the anxiety piece. It's kind of good at explaining, but I would check out that book, and if you give me your name and get a referral, I can find, like, make sure your referral gets to me. The problem is we have a million lists long and my referrals are separated from everybody else, but if anybody gets a referral and wants to give me their name, I can keep an eye out for the referral and make sure it's scheduled. If you want, you don't have to. I'm not gonna believe you.
I had a referral 4.5 years ago when I was in treatment, and then I got out of treatment, and I'm cancer-free right now. Do I need another referral?
Yeah, they expire after a year. But anybody can refer you.
Okay.
Where are you located? And what is your name?
I'll put my name back up on here.
I can also make sure I send that out when I send the recording.
That'd be great. It's very personal.
There we go.
So I do Zoom visits, so you can be wherever. I have office locations on South Clinton and West Hall in Brighton. Not in the big Clinton Crossing place, it's like this little medical complex across the street. And in Rockport at Strong West.
And what do you specifically work with people?
Sleep disorders, non-medication treatment for any sleep disorder.
Okay, so I supposedly have really severe sleep apnea. And they're telling me the only method is the mask that I don't keep on.
Yeah, that unfortunately is true. Sometimes I can work with people to figure out how to make the masks work better for you. But it's like the problem that you described of like taking it off in the middle of the night is very tricky. And really the best approach is to just put it on every night and just keep doing it over and over again. And eventually sometimes you keep it on. I know it's not a really great synopsis, but
I feel like I'm suffocating.
so that I can help with.
That's why I'm throwing it off. Because
Do you feel like that when you go to sleep too?
No, I don't have one right now.
Well, I mean, when you had it, would you feel like you were suffocating if you had it on while you were awake?
I don't know. I didn't do that. I just put it on when I tried to go to sleep.
And did you fall asleep with it on?
Yeah,
Was it hard to fall asleep with it on?
yes, because I have insomnia also.
I could probably do something, but I don't know exactly what. And whether it would be helpful with the mask or not. But I work with a lot of patients who have a hard time with pressures and the masks, and it's tricky. Sometimes it's not super successful, sometimes it is.
Okay. Your name is Danielle?
No,
It's
we should.
Nisha.
I'll email it out, Christine.
Oh,
I'll email it out when I send out the recording to
all
whoever's
right.
here.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
Also, a good friend here, Queen Anthony, unlike her, took very well to the machine. And I have a whole lot of other sleep issues, nightmares, insomnia. I use the same blood pressure medication, although I just got on it. My question for you is, with the exception of that one blood pressure medicine, I have really avoided any taking cognitive behavioral therapy before. Recently, I have discovered that my physical pain has increased tremendously over the last few months, and so I'm finding that I'm sleeping, but I'm not getting into that deep sleep, and getting back on that blood pressure medicine is helping some with that, but I'm just wondering if you would have any other tips that might help me avoid requesting pain meds just to sleep at night.
Yeah, that's very tricky. It's hard to say for sure without, knowing more specifics, but like the research on CBT for insomnia and chronic pain is good, and that it can sometimes help even in the context of pain, but a lot of that depends on the degree to which the pain is causing the sleep problem. If the pain is causing you to wake up, but then you're okay, you just can't get back to sleep, that's more fixable than if you wake up and you stay in pain and you can't get back to sleep because you're in pain all night. And then that's a pain management problem, and it's harder. It's not as much a sleep disorder as pain disorder, and it becomes trickier to treat from a sleep specific standpoint. It's tricky for sure.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll let you guys go, and thank you so much.
Thank you guys. I love your questions.
Thank you.